could hear something coming in, from all sides.
These people that tell me these stories, I believe them 100%. My name's Eric Nelson. I've been a resident of Willow Creek for 22 years. I am a former highway patrolman of California, 27-year veteran. I moved up here to finish my career, so to speak, to work out of my home as a resident post officer. How does someone like me become a person that works in a Bigfoot museum? Well, I'll tell you, I'm 58 years old. Bigfoot became a thing to me in the 70s. I'd lived on the coast in Arcata, which is about 30 miles as a crow flies from here. And when you're living on the coast, you usually come out to the warmer region, which was Willow Creek. 7 years old, we came out to Willow Creek, and right smack dab in the middle of town, at the intersection of SR 96 and SR 299, was a giant Bigfoot statue. It's called the Jim McLaren statue. It was formidable when I was 7 years old, and of course I was going to ask my parents, what is that? And they proceeded to tell me it's Bigfoot. This region's known for Bigfoot. I was an age, a part of my life where a lot of things were either mystical or enchanting, and this became one of those. We continued on out to camp at Trinity Lake that next day, and a local ranger that we knew came to our campfire. And of course I asked about Bigfoot. And he proceeded to tell us these enchanting stories around the campfire at night, telling us that no, this creature has been sighted and lives in these woods around us that could be watching us. I was so enamored and taken that I was afraid to breathe for fear of listening or missing a word. So between the statue and then having an ensuing campfire chat, I was hooked. I transferred out here about 2003. I was busy working, wasn't really doing much in regard to Bigfoot. I was aware. But in 2009, I camped on the Klamath River with a friend who had a cabin in a remote spot of the Klamath River. He was Yurok, and he ran salmon net for his family during the season when salmon ran. I asked him, have you ever had an experience? And he said, well, a matter of fact, I have. I was running net one night on the river bar. I heard this incredible scream. He says, Eric, I knew immediately something out there could crush me. As he's telling me the story, his lip is quivering. Later on, I told him, I said, you were emotional. He said, well, no, I wasn't. So moving forward, I realized, well, wait a second. I patrol the area during salmon season. I do bump into Native Americans that run gill net for their salmon intake. So occasionally, at times, it's not an organic conversation while you're working, but sometimes I would ask somebody that I knew, hey, listen, what's happened on the river this year? Any sightings? And once or twice a year, I would get a story about, yeah, someone saw the ridge walker, Oma, for Bigfoot on the river. There was always lore within the community that they'd seen a Bigfoot. And quite frankly, in the Native American culture here, it's a matter of fact. I heard the museum needed volunteers, and a friend of mine had said, hey, why don't you volunteer? I know you're interested in history and Bigfoot. So I'm an everyday man otherwise. I'm not a researcher. I'm not somebody that goes out looking for Bigfoot. I didn't anticipate to have the context I do have with people, and it's been wonderful. We have about 2,000 people a summer that come through the museum. I would say 98% of those come to see the Bigfoot exhibit, and occasionally they tell me their stories. And these stories are emotional. These stories are persons that have had experiences. They weren't looking for Bigfoot. They weren't looking for an opportunity to discuss it, but because they're in a situation where they felt comfortable, it comes out. And I feel there's a real catharsis for these persons finally getting a chance to get a spot where they could share their stories. So basically I'm a volunteer. However, specifically in the Bigfoot Museum wing here is what I've really, really enjoyed doing. And so I've become that point of contact for Bigfoot, and it's been really enriching. So amongst families, amongst long-term generational persons that have lived here, there were rumors and or stories, no different than Native American stories, but just these are the colonists or original settler families that had experiences with a hair-covered beast. Of course, the name Bigfoot didn't come into existence until 1958. So hairy man, ridge walker. I can tell you in the early 1940s, there is a story locally on Patterson Road. They were coming one summer across large footprints, and they assumed it must have been maybe a hermit or somebody that they had never seen that was leaving these extra large footprints. Well, soon afterwards, they started hearing this incredible sound, this roar at night. And one of the old timers surmised that, well, maybe it's a bear with a broken voice box or jaw. And that was one of the early renditions where someone would come forward and put their name to it. Lots of stories about hunters coming across fleeting glimpses of something in the woods that was large, hair covered, and was definitely not a bear. Also, a number of hunters early on claimed to have seen and felt compelled to shoot whatever this was, and did not shoot because the face looked very human. And so they started thinking maybe it was a feral hermit that was hair covered, something where a person had maybe become more feral. You know, the newspapers and the ability to report these things were on the coast and other places. Here we didn't have a newspaper. So these stories would be a few and far between, usually maybe down at the bar or around a campfire after hunting for the day. But these people wanted to survive, and they couldn't indulge themselves in things that didn't really affect their survival and or their living. But within the community, I find myself asking persons, especially people who have lived here for generations, and then invariably they'll have an auntie or an uncle that had an encounter of some sort, and it's resonated within the family. They tell each other when families get together. So it's been in the culture here for generations. In 1958, there had been a road building crew that was assigned to the Bluff Creek region. Bluff Creek is 25 miles north of here, and the Forest Service had opened it up to logging. Very pristine forest. The road building crew was mainly from Willow Creek proper. They had been there already for a year and a half, and there were rumors coming from that forest. These workers would go out and work for the week, and then would come back home for the weekend, then go back out again. They were coming across things, diesel drums that were thrown around, no apparent indication that machinery had moved them, food missing, things that weren't nice, normal, and not one person could do. It involved a lot of strength to do it, to move these things. So the rumor was already in the community. Jerry Crew, he was the supervisor of this road crew, told people locally, I'm coming across very large footprints. He'd come back to town. He taught Sunday school. He was a very pious man. His reputation in town here was unimpeachable. He felt he was being laughed at. So in '58, he had a hunting partner named Bob Titmus. Bob Titmus is very important to this museum specifically. We'll discuss that later. Bob Titmus was a taxidermist. He lived in Anderson, California. He told Jerry, well, you can use plaster of Paris. So Jerry Crew goes out to the site on a fortuitous day. He casts a print with plaster of Paris. That was October 3rd, I believe. He drives straight down to the coast the next day and meets with the editor of the Humboldt Times, Andrew Genzoli. Names it Bigfoot that moment. He writes a very in-depth article about it. That goes on the AP wire the next day, and it became wildfire around the world. The 50s, the Yeti in the Himalayas was something that international teams were looking for. So this coincided, and the interest was already there worldwide. Now you have the abominable snowman named Bigfoot in Northern California. Andrew Genzoli is quoted as saying that within a month he received 2,500 written letters to his office and over 1,000 inquiries from reporters from around the world. There's a build-up to the Patterson Gimlin film that's important. The players involved in this had already been interested in Bigfoot. Roger Patterson, the main player, the person that would eventually make the film, he'd already been looking for Bigfoot. And in fact, in our museum here, we have a cast from 1964 that he cast. He'd already been in this region, the Bluff Creek region specifically. Well, in 1967, in August, there was a trackway found near the Bluff Creek region, the original 58 cast, within 3 or 4 miles. Eric DeHenden and John Green came out here in August of '67 and identified 590 prints. The Blue Creek Mountain prints is what they're called. Al Hodgson calls Roger Patterson, who was with Bob Gimlin, his sidekick that was also kind of a rodeo man and was helping him out riding the horses. Calls him in Mount St. Helens and says, hey, listen, someone's getting a jump on you. There's tracks down here and they're finding them. So Roger Patterson grabs Bob Gimlin. They drive all the way down from Mount St. Helens. They make a camp out towards Louse Camp, which is where the original 58 cast was printed. And they were here for 20 days in October, so about a month and a half later from the August print discoveries in the Blue Creek Mountain. He says he'd been filming B-roll up and down the creek looking for a Bigfoot, but also filming, backstage stuff for a film that he wanted to put together. October 20th, 1967, he and Bob Gimlin are riding up the river, Bluff Creek, come around a bend in the river, whereupon they see what's eventually called Patty, because it turns out to be a she. But they find a Bigfoot crouching on the riverbank, opposite riverbank. Jumps off his horse, grabs a camera. He has a 16 millimeter Kodak K100, I believe it's called, using Kodachrome #2 film, which again was really good film. And he films, he steadies himself and he proceeds to film this creature over a 58-second duration walking away from him. The famous 352 frame where she turns back over, and it's behind me. You can see she's a female. And they followed the trackway afterwards. It disappeared up the mountainside. They covered some of those prints and they realized that we think we got a Bigfoot on film. We need to rush this somewhere to get it developed to make sure we have it. They rushed to the coast thereafter to ship that up to his brother-in-law, to have it processed to make sure they had something on film. From the period moving forward, the film has been scrutinized, certainly to much extreme scrutiny with persons that are experts. People that are experts in primate bipedalism, persons that are expert in human locomotion, and film experts as well. And to this point in time, there's been nobody able to point out the reasons why that would be a suit. No zippers, no buttons. I would reference Bill Munns, who was a special effects person in Hollywood in '67. And he's a camera expert as well. He's also appears in many documentaries, even current ones, that go over the film, and each time it's enhanced, he points out as to why he didn't have the technical ability in '67 to produce a suit. This would also include John Chambers, who actually did the Planet of the Apes. And he's quoted as saying that this film, if there was a person in a suit, is 20 years beyond what I have the capability of doing. And he was the guy. I would say that skeptics over the years would think, well, within the next to near future, we'll be able to point out artifacts that show it's definitely fake. It's just not true. Every generation, every iteration of enhancement or film technology that scrutinizes this film, if anything, it shows more natural artifacts and body form than a suit over a human being. There's musculature that you can see, especially with the enhancement, calf muscles flexing. Now, the recent enhancement, it shows the foot itself, the toes arching towards the sky. There's a cleft in the buttocks. There is a hematoma now that they've discovered on the right thigh that bulges out as it moves. The trapezius on the top of the shoulders next to the neck, which there isn't much of a neck, it flexes as well. So each and every time they've enhanced these videos, you can see musculature underneath what would be a fur and real creature. Once again, 1967 simply didn't have the technology to show musculature coming through a worn suit. When I started volunteering at the museum, I wasn't sure what to expect. I've been delighted. I get to see people from all over the world that come into this museum. I haven't had a negative experience once. I've learned, I just ask people as they exit this room, hey, what do you think? And several times in the last 3 years, I've had persons, they hesitate a bit and let people leave the museum. They tell me their stories. I mean, their encounter stories. I can tell you 2 years ago, when I was sitting here with my wife, a gentleman came in from Oklahoma. He was there with his wife. He said, well, I lived here, Trinity Lake, which is just east of here. He came in from Reading, not too far from there. I was a young boy, my dad was a logger there. His wife interrupts him. He looks at my wife, she looks at my wife, excuse me, she says, what he's gonna tell you right now, he's not told a single soul outside of his family for 50 years. So he says, 10 years old, Trinity Lake, I'm fishing on Coffee Creek, and I'm fishing for an hour, and I get to the confluence of the Trinity River. He goes, I see two skinny, hair-covered apes, and they're playing in the water, and they don't notice me. He goes, I don't know how long I stared at these things. It seemed like 15, 20 minutes. It was likely 2 or 3. He said he hears a shrill whistle from across the river in the woodline, whereupon the two figures look up, look startled. He looks startled, he says, in return. They hesitate, he hesitates, and then they scramble up out of the river and never be seen again. He goes back home that day, tells his dad, and his mom both laughed at him. Oh, those were bears. Because I didn't see bears, Dad, I saw apes. And his dad wouldn't let him entertain the fact that these were apes or Bigfoot. As he's telling me the story, my wife yells me, she goes, look at his arms. Every hair on both arms was raised. And what I can tell you, after being in law enforcement for 27 years, I used to interview a lot of persons that were in very traumatic situations. Good witnesses that are living the event, they give you body tells. They have emotional reactions when they're reliving the event. And I've seen these things. And these persons have shared these stories. We've made a connection. So when people ask me if I believe in Bigfoot, I say I've never had an experience. I would need to have an experience, or it'd have to be proven scientifically. However, these people that tell me these stories, I believe them 100%. All summer long, we get persons that are interested. Some are even a little more in depth than that. Cliff Barrickman, Bigfoot fame, someone that's an investigator. He owns a museum. He calls the Bigfoot citizen someone that's interested, up to a Bigfoot enthusiast, someone that's a little more versed. And I would add Bigfoot researcher for those that really truly go out into the woods. And to be clear, we have a history here. It's not for me to convince people Bigfoot exists, but there are persons currently that go out and they claim to be finding artifacts and/or sightings of Bigfoot currently.
I'm Tod Samples.
My name is Trevor Miller.
I got interested in Bigfoot back in the 70s when I was younger. I lived back east. About 8 years ago, I moved up to Humboldt County. One of the reasons was the Bigfoot interest, and for the last 8 years, I've been researching Bigfoot in the Six Rivers National Forest, Bluff Creek drainage area.
My wife and I moved here about 3 years ago from Illinois, and we joked that I was just coming to California to find gold and Sasquatch, but I had no idea that I would actually be involved with it. Growing up in Illinois, you hear of stories, obviously, it was a big thing on TV and stuff, but didn't have a ton of stories in my area. But still, I didn't believe that everybody was a liar. I figured somebody had to be telling the truth eventually at one point. So, but then we moved into this area, and wasn't too long before I ran into Tod and Doug and a couple other guys, and I loved camping, and they loved camping, and so I just got in on their group. And next thing you know, while we were there, they said, "Want to do some squatching?" And next thing you know, we're wandering around the woods looking for footprints and evidence, and by God, if we didn't find some, and had me convinced right away. It didn't take long. I think our very first camping trip out, I was like, "Yep, this is what I want to do now."
Well, some of the characteristics of a Bigfoot would be they're bipedal, walk upright, they're large, they're anywhere from 6 to 10 feet tall, weighing 400 to 1,000 pounds.
Hairy, human-like features, but exaggerated, long, elongated, including extra long arms, extra long legs, that type of thing.
Very elusive. They can have a bad smell to them.
Powerful smell, skunk or garbage, rotten garbage, that type of thing.
The difference in looking for Squatch in the past compared to now, the technology has changed. That's mainly the big thing. The audio, the thermal imaging, the casting materials is basically the same.
That's not changed much. Grab your plaster of Paris, you throw it in your backpack, and it's good, as good today as it was back then. What we usually do to prepare to get ready for a Bigfoot expedition is make sure we have our gear with us. Definitely always have to carry a backpack for you. You never know when you're going to run across a footprint, which has actually happened more often than I ever believed would be possible. And we're talking about it on the way up here. It seems like about every fourth or fifth time we go out, we'll find some evidence, which is it's pretty good. For preparation, I guess, for the majority of the part, we just take make sure we have our casting stuff, make sure that we have any kind of measuring tape we need to measure the size. Right now, 3D imaging on our phone right now, just to go around it and make sure we get a 3D image of the print so we can see what it looks like when it's reversed and everything. So, because even our casting, it gets a lot of stubble in it and it doesn't look great, but the 3D imaging, that's been a real breakthrough. It's not like you can just lay out a big piece of meat on a stick and put that trap in the tree to drop down on them or anything like that. It doesn't work like that. So, yeah, we got a lot more toys nowadays than we used to have to play with.
Well, we have our research areas from our past experiences from being up in the area multiple times. And basically what we have found that going to an area to camp, we set up camp, do some hiking around to stir up the area a little bit, and then that evening we stay in the camp and wait for them to come find us.
I think the neatest thing that ever happened to me while we were out was one of the first big camping groups we did. We had a bunch of people with us. It was as much camping as it was squatching. But we went down a rock road, which led to a dirt road, which led to no road at one point. So we were in the middle of nowhere, setting up camp in a blank area that used to be an old loggers camp in the 40s, but now it's still just a blank area in the middle of the woods. And I was sleeping in the back of my pickup truck, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I heard, to me, what sounded like a downshifting semi-truck coming down the valley and in our area at 3 in the morning. And for some reason, I was thinking to myself, it must just be a semi on that dirt road that we turned off of. But what would a semi be doing there? That's all I thought, 3 in the morning. I was tired. And so I ignored it, I was just like, yeah, I can't, it's just a semi-truck, And then I heard it again about 15 minutes later, same thing, just except for louder and closer this time. And I'm like, what the heck? I had no idea what it was. I didn't think anything of it till the next morning when I woke up, and I was telling Tod and Doug and the rest of the guys, and they're like super excited. They're like, what did it sound like? And where'd you hear it come from? And blah, blah. And I was like, I said, that dirt road that we came in on, we turned off of to come in here. I said, I don't know what a semi-truck would be doing. I said, that dirt road comes to a dead end, another 50 feet. We'd have never gone anywhere on that. He said, there doesn't go anywhere. And then that day we decided to walk over towards that area to see what we can find. And I'll be darned, going up the side of the hill, we found a great track. And then we got up, ended up going up to the top and found a great bedding area. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. But yeah, woke me up in the middle of the night. And at the time I didn't realize what it was. But now that I think back on it, I was like, that was my first experience and probably one of my best experiences with the Squatch, because we found, we heard it, found prints, found a nesting area, and so that really convinced me there that I need to keep looking.
Scariest event I've ever experienced was personal. We backpacked in about 4 miles from the trailhead to an area called Bear Lakes up by Happy Camp. We get there was a disheveled old camp that had been just abandoned, so we cleaned it up. That first night we had heard a knock from across the lake, and then the next morning we got up. Me and another friend was over by the other part of the lake, and we were hearing noises up on top of the ridge, and we were responding, and it was responding back. That night we were again around the campfire. We didn't hear anything at first. Everything was quiet, so we all went to bed. I woke up about 1:30, and the other 2 guys they were up. They were franticking. They were building this huge fire. They said they had been trying to wake me up for a couple hours, and they said there was something coming in. They could hear stuff outside the camp, brush moving, knocks. So we got up, and they built this huge fire, and we're up for probably a couple hours. Fire was going down. We hadn't heard anything, so we all went back to sleep. I was laying there in my tent, couldn't go back to sleep, and all of a sudden, as the fire started going down, I could hear something coming in. From all sides. And as I was laying in my tent, something started walking up this little dry creek bed that my tent was by, and I could feel the impact tremors in my back of the footsteps coming in. And it got, 10 feet outside my tent. I wanted to look out. I've been getting grief from my daughter, and said, you go out there all the time and you want to see one, and you don't even look out. I said I couldn't move. I was so scared. Then, with the logs going over the fire, one of the logs had broken off and fell back in the fire, and it roared back up, and this thing took off outside the camp. But I thought for sure it was 10 feet outside my tent, and I thought it was going to grab my tent and just drag me out into the woods, and I'd be Bigfoot food.
Sasquatch sandwich.
Yeah. But that was quite I fell back asleep, and I woke up and there was light, and I was like, oh man, I was so happy it was daylight. But that was for two nights we had a wild experience. The things that we have found as a group, as our team, we've heard chatter. We've found snow print tracks over 100 yards going up and 100 yards coming down.
What an amazing find! You want to find a perfect footprint, but you don't find perfect footprint because you find it in mud or you find it in sticks or something like that. So it's just so hard. But these were just completely obvious what they were. So that was just an amazing find too. A while back, that was really cool.
Howls, rock thrown at us, tree knocks. There is a college in North Carolina that's doing extensive DNA research right now. DNA on hair and eDNA, environmental DNA, where they can get DNA samples from creeks. If you find a footprint, you scoop out the dirt. They can possibly get DNA samples from that. We were
recently up in Oregon, in that area, and we were talking to some fellow researchers. They talked a lot about a big project going on. Was it in Washington, the project with us? Yeah, so it was they're a forestation company, owned a very large area up in there. And when they sent in their scouts to check it out, they ran across several of these large, unexplainable bird's nest-looking things. So they asked a primatologist to come look at them. And so she was there for quite a while, and actually I think they're still studying to this day. And so they had brought one of the nests that they had found, but the rest of them they left laying there, and I think they found 16 of them in one area, and it was really cool to see it. And they said that's how gorillas, silverback gorillas, build their nests out in the wild. Looks just like this, except for it was much, much larger. And so, yeah, while you would like to find a half-dead carcass laying on the side of the road while you're searching, you settle for, it seems like, you settle for scat and for hair and for footprints, and hope one day you get a chance to see the actual beast himself, you know.
Yes, so in 1958, we have the famous road building crew that found and cast that print, October 5th of 1958. You know, Bob Titmus, he's the famous person behind the scenes. He was the one that instructed Jerry Crew to cast that original print, which was a famous news article that was written by Andrew Genzoli. This is the article went to worldwide on the AP Wire. This is what became famous. That's the day they named it Bigfoot. Bob Titmus went back out to that scene. And what he did is went down to the ravine next to the road where the original prints were. And he came across this really remote ravine that was really tough to get into, came across these perfect prints as he described them. This is amazing. So one thing Bob Titmus did is that he wrote on the back of his prints, verbatim, what he came across that day. Look at that beautiful cursive writing. This was November 2nd of 1958, so almost a month later from the original 1958 Bigfoot print that went around the world. Well, I'll tell you, the older casts, originally what they would do, they would rub off some of the scruff on the bottom of these feet. At that time, they were more interested in the outline of the foot than what the footbed would tell you. But moving forward, I think you guys have found the prints. And what do you guys do? You leave the fluff on the footprint itself, is that correct?
Yeah, we leave all the debris in there. We'll remove some of the leaf material, the lighter stuff, but everything else we leave there.
And that's because you can actually get information from that stuff,
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, you get more information from the natural debris there.
Never know when you might get a hair or two stuck in there that you didn't see until the casting's done. So we don't clear anything out anymore, so they're rougher than these older versions. We did get lucky on a while back, and after a fresh burn, we found a track in an area. So it's amazing the difference between the burn footprint we have versus some of the other ones still have pebbles and everything stuck in it. This one was kind of clear, so it's reminiscent of some of the older ways they used to do it.
To me, what's really cool is prints that we found basically in the same vicinity as where these were found. And these were found 70 years before our prints. So that just says that they're still there.
We know in 1967 is the famous film, the 58-second film. Patty walks across that distance. They get the film. Well, she left prints. Bob Gimlin was smart enough to realize there was a storm coming. They had to get the film shipped out to see if they had anything at all. So he put pieces of bark all over these prints, hoping to preserve them because we had a storm coming in. So 10 days later, Bob Titmus comes to the scene. He finds a number of viable prints. So he casts about 9 Patterson Gimlin film prints, and these are 4 of them. The rest we have in cases. And one here I'll show you. These are really fragile. He didn't have enough plaster of Paris, so these are thin. However, this is one of Patty's prints from 1967, mid-tarsal break. You see in here. And you can see, now the substrate's a very dark, sandy soil, which matched the substrate there that day. And these are it. This is part of history.
They had no idea about the mid-tarsal break, what that actually was. It wasn't until really Dr. Meldrum.
Really good point, Todd. So Dr. Meldrum wrote his paper in the 90s describing the fact that primates and or Bigfoot, he believes, has what's called a mid-tarsal break, and we see that in these prints. Hoaxers from that time period, they used wooden cutouts. They had no idea about the flexibility of the foot and how to reflect that. And we see these in these prints, and we have a number of other prints that are from period that show exactly what you're talking about.
What do you got here?
Well, we have copies of the Patterson Gimlin film. So long story short, Bill Munns came here. He was going to analyze some of our collection and the 50th anniversary in 2017 of the Patterson Gimlin film. He came in here exclusively to look at the Eric Beckyard collection, which had been donated to our museum and hadn't been gone through. They were specifically looking for possibly what was rumored to be a copy or an original of the Patterson Gimlin film. As you know, the Patterson Gimlin film, the original is gone. They don't have any idea where it is. It's lost in a warehouse somewhere, most likely. So Bill Munns came here. He reviewed a number of items, hadn't found anything. At the very end, one of our volunteers came across these 2 canisters, and these are marked Patterson Gimlin film, 1967. Both of these. Bill Munns was able to recognize that these are first-generation copies of the film. So these are copies. Nonetheless, these are valuable. And the story goes that Patricia Patterson made the copies for Eric Beckyard, and these are what he donated to us. So pretty interesting.
Okay, well, we have some prints that we've been casting the last 4 or 5 years. These aren't as pretty as the other ones, but because now when we cast them, we don't try to clean up the material out of the casting.
Keep in mind that a lot of these casts were made on mountain territory. So instead of being in sandbars or in gravel and things that some of the earlier casts we looked at, these are in much, much harder ground. So the impressions are really not quite as deep. If we notice the one over there on the far, that was right after a fresh burn. So you can see that a lot of the little pieces, the twigs are gone. The impression was much deeper because the ground was softer. The real reason you don't brush it off or try to clean them up is because, I don't know if you can see in this one, but you never know what's going to get stuck in it. So here we have a couple of hairs stuck in this, hair sticking up right here, and you never know what kind of DNA evidence gets trapped in an untouched foot. So you don't want to mess with it. You just pour it just the way it is.
Well, this print here is probably my favorite one, just because the snow prints that we found were less than a half mile from where we found this print, and it's the same size, 13 inches, same width. It's, so to me, because we found this so close to the snow prints, it was more likely the same animal. These 2 here were found in Wright's Place. It's up off Slate Creek Road, and this one was April 1st of 2024. It was down not far from Bluff Creek, and again you see the mid-tarsal break here, toes, the heel. This was found in Bald Mountain on our camping trip. We were up there. It was freezing cold, but this was one that we found.
I like this one because it really shows a characteristic. You notice the color of the rocks.
Yeah.
Way different from everything else we have here. I love the way casting picks up the accents of the area we're in, you know, whether it be the burnt out area or whether it be a more gravelly area or just this particular area that has those beautiful blonde rocks in it. So the way we do casting nowadays, leaving everything, and it really gives it some character too.
And with all these prints, it wasn't just one print. We find a trackway, but these were the best prints to cast them.
We've had a lot of other footprints we've found over the years, but just nothing that could be cast. It's not everything that's castable. So we're really happy with the results we've had with the ones that have turned out.
In 1997, Bob Titmus, a famous Bigfooter, he passed away. He had quite a collection of casts, and he was here from day one in 1958. His estate contacted our museum and said, listen, we have quite a collection of artifacts. If you were to find the accommodation space, we're willing to donate this. Well, the museum got together with the townfolk, the Chamber of Commerce, and said, hey, we have a wonderful opportunity here. They began to raise money, and with the assistance of the U.S. Forest Service and a grant, we built this room. And in 2000, the room was complete. There was a dedication. John Green, famous Bigfooter, came with Bob Titmus's collection. It became a worldwide AP wire story again. 2003, Willow Creek Museum puts on the International Bigfoot Symposium. Jen Goodall was going to be the keynote speaker. All the luminaries in the Bigfoot world came here. Bob Gimlin of Patterson Gimlin film fame, he came here. The first time in years he'd been involved in anything Bigfoot related, because he had felt at the end of the 80s and 90s that he was being ridiculed and there was no inherent gain. He came to the symposium and he said it was such a resounding feeling to have so much affirmation and so much interest in this subject that he began giving interviews again. What I can tell you is that Bigfoot is in the zeitgeist generationally. You know, since '58, this has been a thing, maybe preceding that with Native Americans and some of the original settlers. So this is generational. For the persons that live here in Willow Creek, it's just a matter of fact. It's a subject that comes up. This is what goes on in this town. We have a parade every year. We celebrate Bigfoot. In terms of belief and that sort of thing, that's upon the individual family or person. But there's undeniable. Anybody that lives in this town that have friends, that's one of the first things that comes up in conversation. Well, you live in Willow Creek, tell us about Bigfoot. So it is in the community, it's generational. I don't see it ever changing. Late summer, September, October, we start getting what I call as a pilgrimage. I start getting a number of persons coming through here that want to pay respects or take a look at the museum, maybe bend an ear to find out what's been going on in the region. And they head out to the Patterson Gimlin site. It's been established by the Bluff Creek Project fellas. They've irrefutably reestablished the site. No, this is it. So now people have a spot they know definitively they can go to, and they come here first. And the excitement and the satisfaction of them finally being here, I get to see that. There's been intense scrutiny on Willow Creek in the last month and a half. Assembly member in California introduced a proposed bill to make Bigfoot the state cryptid. And his explanation was, hey, listen, we have serious subjects that we discuss here at the Assembly. Every once in a while, we introduce things that are helpful to the region. And he said so, Mr. Chris Rogers. He said, Willow Creek is known for Bigfoot. Why shouldn't we celebrate these things? Now, a cryptid is an unknown, unproven creature. That's kind of where this sits right now. Your purists will say, no, it's a creature that's yet to be proven, but we know it exists. Other ones will say it's a wonderful legend and it has legs that keep on going. I don't know, but certainly it's out there. And once again, we have a reiteration of interest in Bigfoot. I think it's a really important point to make. You know, we live on the edge of the wilderness here, quite frankly. We have adventurers of all sorts that come out here, rafters, campers, backpackers. These persons aren't looking for Bigfoot. These people are adventurers. They're looking to enjoy the wilderness and the wilds. They push out into the edge of the unknown. And at night, these persons have campfires, do their routines. And some of the stories that come from these people that aren't looking, you know, the things that go bump in the night, and the overwhelming sense of fear of something being out there in the woods that they couldn't identify, and they knew that it wasn't normal. And this happens a lot. There's a misnomer out there. Oh, there was one. Why is it such a big deal? At one time he got it on film. No, there are persons that are experiencing sightings of Bigfoot to this day, and they make those reports. I can tell you there's one organization that started in, I think, 94, could be 96, and they ask for persons to make claims of sightings and or experiences, and they will investigate them. The gentleman that runs the organization said, we fielded 75,000 experiences for persons calling in. We've substantiated 5,000 of those with investigators we sent to the field that investigated the spot and said it was either a Class A sighting or a Class B encounter. And, you know, ultimately, people can say what they want to say. This is ongoing. This has been going on for hundreds of years if you include the Native Americans. So of all these 5,000 substantiated reports, only one of those has to be true.